Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
And here's the twist.
Please welcome to the stage Axios business reporter Nathan Bomey.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Nathan Bomey. I'm author of Axios Closer, which is a daily newsletter on all things business. You can subscribe to that and all of our newsletters at axios.com/newsletters. Welcome to a special edition of News Shapers, celebrating America's 250th anniversary with conversations featuring the leaders, ideas, and innovations shaping the next chapter of our country. A special thank you to our partner this morning, Bank of America, for all their continued support for our News Shaper series. Our first guest of the morning is leading one of the NFL's most transformative moments, overseeing a new era for the Washington Commanders, both on and off the field. Please welcome to the stage the president of the Commanders, Mark Clouse.
Nathan, how are you? Good to see you.
Really. Morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for getting up early today.
Well, you are engaged in something of a building campaign. $3.7 billion investment that you're making not that far from where we're sitting today. What is the latest on what people can expect?
Yeah, I think it's, as people often ask me about, okay, that seems so far away, it opens in 2030. Every single week from now until then, there are milestones that we have to deliver, and I'm happy to say things are going very well. I'm very lucky to be working with the district, who, especially the mayor and the district council, that really kind of get it. They understand the economic significance and what this means to DC, to not just build a stadium, but develop the community, which has always been the vision. And so that makes life a lot easier. We really are rowing in the same direction, and so far so good. If you drive by the site, you'll see construction out there working. Right now we're doing like storm sewers, infrastructure work, and next spring will be the official groundbreaking as we start going up, not going down. And so that's exciting and right on schedule, right on track.
What are the big decisions you still have to make?
Well, I think there are a million decisions in a stadium, and I'm embroiled right now in everything from the width of the columns on the front of the stadium to the carpeting in the suites to the video boards, and how big can they actually be, and can I make the seats shake in the stadium? So there's a lot of what I would call small decisions, but I think the biggest decision is really making sure that we anticipate all the needs of the stadium in the construction, and that we ensure that when we're done, we've anticipated all of the different uses, how to make it operationally efficient, sustainable, and those are probably where we spend a great deal of our time.
A lot of stadiums and arenas historically end up sort of being islands, and they're not really integrated in the neighborhoods with where they're situated. How are you ensuring that that's not the case here?
Well, I can tell you that from the very beginning of this journey, the vision was to be much more than just a stadium. I think Josh Harris, who owns the team, has a real commitment, really a legacy that he wants to create by developing a community. And, the great thing about DC is we actually have some really good examples already, right? Whether it's Nats Park and Navy Yard and Audi Field, Cap Center, a lot of really good examples. And one of the things that helps us a lot in the RFK site is that was a stadium. So we're not cutting it into an urban area. We're actually taking something that had kind of been abandoned utilizing that as the anchor, and then developing the community out from it. And when you think about being surrounded by the Anacostia waterway and the neighborhoods that we can connect with this project, it really is transformative.
Talking about apartments and restaurants and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Parks.
I mean, it's a significant footprint, arguably the largest footprint of mixed-use development around any sports facility in the country. It's going to have a little bit of everything. I mean, really what we want it to be is a thriving community, not just an entertainment center, but a fully integrated community. And one of the things that's interesting about this project that I learned, and you know, you'll pick this up quickly as I describe it, but because we have a roof on the stadium, which was controversial even for us in thinking about, you know, what we want, but the mayor was steadfast on that, and we've come to really appreciate and agree. But one of the benefits of that is that building will be operational, we hope, 200 nights a year. And that means that the people that work at the stadium have full-time jobs and careers. So living in the community, working at the stadium is really powerful. It's a real tool or catalyst for attracting the development. And that's something that we think is really key in making this community come to life.
So we know that next year, Washington hosting the NFL draft
Yeah.
on the National Mall.
Right.
That'll be before the stadium is ready, of course. What about a little bit further down the road? Are you in talks to potentially host a Super Bowl here?
Yeah. Well, I want to hit it out of the park for the draft first, and I'm very confident we can do that. Events DC is a partner of ours here that's really a pro, and again, the NFL's playbook on this is incredible. If you've watched the last couple, these have become amazing events to bring fans together and provide access. And you know, for me, this is just a really, I hope, a special moment for our fans to be able to be part of it in their hometown and home area. And look, we have big ambitions. We do that really well. I think you'll see us campaigning for a Super Bowl, and I think that's certainly possible.
Let's pivot a little bit, talk about the business of the NFL. Just a few days ago, the estate of Paul Allen agreed to sell the Seattle Seahawks for a record $9.6 billion to the family of Vinod Khosla. And, this is a record deal for the NFL. It says something about the valuations of teams. Obviously, you're not selling a team, but are these valuations sustainable, realistic? Like, what did you think about that deal?
Yeah, I think that, just to probably take a little bit of a macro view on this, the world of sports is very much in a transformative moment. Nostalgically, people may think about the days of these businesses being small family-run operations where, you really operated it almost like a cash business where you're just, working on the basics and the foundation focused on football. Today's world, when you're reaching, double-digit billions, these are, mid-cap companies, right? These are operating with a commercial need and commercial operation that is far more significant. And so I do think teams are going to match that opportunity of value and continue to strive to increase their capability in operating and optimizing, if you will, while still supporting, what we believe is the most important thing, which is keeping the product on the field competitive, exciting, fan-centric. And I think that's what the NFL has done extremely well. And to answer your question, I do think it's sustainable. One thing that's interesting about the NFL is there is no other original content that's created that draws the number of eyeballs to it the way the NFL does, if you compare it to anything else. An interesting statistic is the 25 most watched programs of 2025, 23 of them were NFL games. I think one was the State of the Union, and it might be the College Football Championship was the other one. But short of that, that's the product. And when you're commanding that kind of attention and focus, these valuations in a very, very scarce asset pool I very much think so, and you'll see the NFL continue to make progress on media and other areas where that value will continue to be justified within the context of what the business is doing.
The NFL certainly seems like it's in a transition point from a media perspective. You just mentioned it. I think my Green Bay Packers are going to play on Netflix on Christmas Day. And you've got teams playing on Amazon. You've got, of course, teams on CBS, Fox, and NBC. You know, some fans, though, I think are sort of getting frustrated with how fractionalized this is becoming. Is there a concern for you that there could be an alienation going on?
I think the league has done actually a very, very good job, and it's something being relatively new to the world of sports. I've been very impressed with what I would describe as from a business world. You're always looking for a well-articulated vision and long-term strategy. And I think the NFL's is world class, and what they're very purposeful in doing is thinking about how to continue to cultivate, support, and build the fan base of the NFL. You see that in a variety of different examples, whether it's expansion globally or whether it is the breadth of some of the platforms to give really fans opportunities across a variety of different ways to engage with the league. And look, I think that is where consumers are going when it comes to media. The idea that we have product that's available in a variety of different ways to our consumers that match their lifestyle, how they engage with media, I think is the bigger opportunity. And as we've watched some of this, the success has been incredible. We were part of a Christmas Day game last year against the Cowboys. Didn't quite finish the way I wanted it to, but it was a great platform and great event, and we did that on Netflix, and it was extremely well executed, and I think fans are getting a tremendous product. So, I think if we really look at how consumers behave, we're really trying to meet them where they are, and that's more of the vision or the objective.
Just yesterday, we had Tarek Mansour, the CEO of Kalshi, on this stage. I interviewed him about the surging prediction market space. Now, the Commanders have partnerships with more traditional sports books. Do you have a position or just a belief on whether the rise of prediction markets is a problem, or are you okay with it?
I think that what's most important to us, and I think the NFL has been very, very wisely guarded, is ensuring that we protect the integrity of the game. That's the most important thing, is that fans know that they're getting a fair product, and that what they're experiencing is authentic, real, and guarded. And so I think what again, our perspective is, we want to make sure that's the case, and where we feel good about our partners that we have in the league and some of the sports books that have really been responsible and proactive. I think we want to see how this unfolds before anyone, makes any major judgment one way or the other.
Yeah. What you may not know about Mark is that before joining the Washington Commanders, he was in business, led Campbell Company, Campbell Soup, and before that you were at Mondelez. And my understanding is you had, which of course makes it Oreo. My understanding is you had something called an Oreo strategy. And this is about what, maintaining core strategies. What is this Oreo strategy?
Yeah, my friend John at Sports Illustrated and ESPN. So so one of the things that I think, it's been interesting. People ask me, coming from the business world, what's the same, what's different? And I kind of describe it as 50-50. 50% of it's just business, right? You're driving revenue, you're managing costs, you're all the things that you would do in any company that you're in. And then the other 50% is a little more unique, one of which is the fact that, as I tell people affectionately, people like soup a lot. They love football. It's a whole different level of emotion and connectivity. They will find me and let me know what they think, and I love that. And but one of the areas where I do think there's some value that can be delivered, and certainly we have somewhat of a unique set of circumstances with the Commander brand and the history of that and how it became the name of the team. And so one thing that we're really trying to do is ensure that in any brand that I've ever worked on, you want to be very protective of equity, and so you want to be very careful that you're not unintentionally diluting what the brand is. And so that's really what the premise of the Oreo idea, where we did wildly creative, mashups with other brands, wild cream in an Oreo. But boy, you always saw the Oreo blue on the package. You always saw, when we would advertise, you would see a parent and a child with the cookie together experiencing that Oreo moment of twist, lick, and dunk. You did that forever. That's been, proven for, the last 80 years. And I think here at the Commanders, what we've really tried to do is reach back into the equity of the Redskins and the team's heritage and try to connect it better with where we are today. And I think fans missed much of the things that even the color, right? Even that burgundy and gold. And so you saw us this year bring back new jerseys that are really old jerseys, but it's really connecting the past to the future. That's really what the goal is, and trying to bring the elements and the equities that we want back into the franchise. So there's your Oreo analogy to football. Didn't know it could be made, but it can.
Absolutely. Now, we are unfortunately out of time, but very quickly, since we do often like to end these conversations with one fun thing, we know you don't make player personnel decisions, so we're not going to blame you for that. But do you recommend Oreos and Campbell's soup as a nutritional strategy for the players?
I think everything is, yes, of course, everything in moderation. I tell people, it's funny, Oreos, those are two very uniquely different things, but they both have one thing in real common, and that is the emotional benefit that you get from eating them both. Chicken soup on a cold day, when you're not feeling great, nothing better. And Oreos just help you get through a lot of tough times. That's all. I'm not going to lie. I might have ate a couple Oreos last year.
Hopefully there won't be any of that this year. Well, Mark,
no, not this year.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, Nathan.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, well, that's a lot of fun. I didn't grill him about whether they're going to defeat the Packers this year or not. That's going to be for behind the stage. We'll get right on top of that. Now we're going to make a hard pivot to a fascinating conversation. Our next guest helps shape how leaders around the world understand public sentiment, the workforce, and trends driving decision-making. Through his leadership at Gallup, he has helped build one of the world's leading sources of insight into how people think, work, and live. Please welcome to the stage Gallup Global Managing Partner, Joe Daly. Thanks for joining us.
How are you?
Do you know anything about football?
I know a little bit about football. I've lived in D.C. for a long time, but I don't want to tell Mark who my team is, though, so we'll leave that for another time.
I told him so. All right, now big week for you. Gallup obviously has incredible heritage of research. Came out with some data this week showing that Americans' confidence in U.S. institutions is near a historic low. What were some of the key findings from that research?
So the article came out yesterday, but the big picture on American trends, we've been tracking them for over 50 years. So it's amazing to be able to see over the arc of time how they've changed. The big takeaway is just trending down pretty much on a very straight line. But looking within the numbers, there are 14 major institutions we track. 12 of them right now sit kind of at or near their all-time low. So the natural question you might ask is which ones are not, and they surprised me at least a little bit. Banks and organized labor are sitting above their low points on the trends. So that's organized labor has experienced a little bit of a renaissance in terms of American opinion. The two that lead and have always led in Americans' minds with a lot of confidence are small business and the military. So small business is number one, and kind of always has held that. Military go back and forth. But I think if you look at the trends too, the other thing that I want to call out is the fact that historically these have not been very partisan. So if you look at institutions, you don't see big gaps between Republicans and Democrats. But over the last couple of years, we're starting to see them come apart. So the presidency is always flip-flopping, but now we're seeing partisan divides on the Supreme Court. We're seeing it in our education institution and other places like that. But one, I guess just to go back, small business, you guys, is the only institution we have where Republicans and Democrats both have high confidence. Majorities of Americans have high confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that polarization is funny how when one different party is in power, that all of a sudden perceptions of the economy in particular change overnight. What have you noticed about that?
Well, so I think you could actually consider what I'll talk about next, which is our trends on capitalism and socialism. Mm-hmm. You could consider capitalism an institution in America, I think. So we've been tracking them for a long time. And big picture, we've been seeing a slight decline in positive views of capitalism and a very slight increase, less of an increase in positive views of socialism. But within those numbers, so you'd say, well, it's not collapsing, it's okay. But there's huge changes demographically taking place within those numbers. So if you take capitalism as an example, again, a very counterintuitive view would be the people that are getting that are dropping the most on capitalism is high education, higher income, and young people, which means that we're also seeing increases in positive views from older Americans with lower education, lower income. So it's very surprising. And then you look within socialism, similarly, what's driving the trend up is Democrats and the education and income. Higher education has a more positive view of socialism. Now, I just found this last night, I was looking at the numbers, I think it's really important so if you line them up and you say socialism versus capitalism by demographic group, there are 3 key demographic groups in America that have a more positive view of socialism than capitalism. And that is young people, that is higher educated people, and that is women. That now, if you just line them up, have a higher view. And
we've seen some positive momentum for socialism in the last few weeks at the ballot box. Let's pivot and talk a bit about AI. This spring, we saw a number of commencement speakers get booed by students when they talked positively about AI. Now, the good news is we haven't been booed yet, but there's still time. Why do you think students are booing AI? Is it just because the fear that maybe this could lead to destruction of their job opportunity?
Great question. I think it's one of the most important questions to look into. Taking a slight step back in an attempt to answer that would be, so what's going on with young people? You know, we look at the trends that are being driven by institutions, other things. Young people are definitely not feeling great about institutions. They're driving a lot of these differences. But you could also look at some other really interesting, like mental health for young people. So the data there, you've got, I think 3 in 10 young people are not reporting being sad, they're reporting that they're being treated for depression. 3 in 10 young people. You also look at men and sort of this conversation around loneliness. 25% of young men are reporting that they experience daily loneliness, which is like substantially higher than any other OECD peer where we ask the same question. Then you got to look into jobs. You know, this is part of and maybe you would say the miscommunication of AI, but US Americans don't feel optimistic about being able to find a job, especially young people. So if you look at, traditionally you would say young people are the most optimistic about finding a job, older Americans the least, and that holds historically. We've seen a reversal since COVID, where now older people are more positive than younger people, but the trend is coming apart wider now. So young people have a 21-point deficit, so 18 to 34, relative to 55 plus Americans. So not feeling great about the opportunity to find a job. And I think that is tying into this AI conversation where, you know, on top of all of that, young people have been told AI is coming and it's going to wipe you out and you'll never be able to find a job. So I think there's a natural potentially a natural backlash against that.
And I know that you reported just last year, I believe, that the perception of the value of a college degree has reached effectively an all-time low. What do you think's happening there? Is it politics that's sort of affecting people's opinion, or is it just college costs that are getting out of control?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this comes down to cost, where again you're looking at a big investment in your education, and then you're looking at your opportunity to find a job, and you come out and basically pay for that. And I think people are looking at the equation, and and again, it's not entirely true. I think the data doesn't totally support that young people won't be able to find jobs and all the things that we're hearing. When we ask Americans in the workplace, they are reporting like roughly the same amount of layoffs. That it's been pretty stable over time. And when they do report why, it's not AI related. But so I think young people, that education is tied mostly to that optimism about finding a job.
Yeah. Another data point you had recently here, just showing that the share of U.S. non-homeowners who expect to buy a home within 5 years has dropped to 25%, the lowest that you have measured since you started asking the question in 2013. So home ownership dreams seem to be dwindling.
Yeah, we've asked that question for a pretty long time. So back in 2013, 2015, I think it was about 6 in 10 Americans said that they would buy a home in the next 5 years. It's kind of been cut in half. So the latest measures we just got from this year, it's now down to a pretty low rate. So it's all tied into, I think, if you said like, why are young people starting to be more positive about socialism, less positive on capitalism, et cetera? I think cost is a big one that comes into this. And you look at 3 core industries where we've got cost increasing over time, not just recently, but for a long time. It's housing, it's healthcare, and it's education, back to your other point. So I think that's all part of it.
In our final minute here, talking about the 250th anniversary of America, one of the good news in your research is that belief in the American dream is not dead. Talk about that.
Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to bring you guys up a little bit before I get off stage. Sorry about all the negative trends. But yeah, I think the positive is we ask about the American dream. So Americans don't feel good about maybe how the government's working for them, job prospects, all of that. But the American spirit is alive, and you can see it in the American dream data, where the vast majority of Americans think that they themselves will achieve the American dream, and they think that it is a worthy thing to strive for over time. So that would be my closing, would be we're not feeling great about some things about our economy and the government, but our spirit is there, and you got to bet on the Americans because we haven't lost that yet.
I love it. All right, Joe, thank you so much. That's all the time we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Put your hands together for senior economics reporter Courtenay Brown.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Our next guest has spent his career at the intersection of business, diplomacy, economic policy making. He was the former U.S. ambassador to Japan, now helping shape some of the Senate's biggest debates on trade, taxes, crypto, America's economic future. Please join me in welcoming Senator Bill Hagerty from the great state of Tennessee.
Thank you, Courtney.
All right, let's start with the news. Readers of Axios AM woke up this morning to some intel from my colleague Barack Ravid as President Trump escalates the attacks in Iran. How does this conflict end? Sources on Wall Street this morning are warning about $100 oil. There's talk of this being a forever war. How would you console their worries?
Well, I'd say that if you just step back and look at it from not a 30,000, but a 50,000 foot view, the Iranian situation and their leverage is degrading consistently over time. They're in a far worse position than they ever were when the JCPOA was negotiated. If you think about where we were with the target package that Brad Cooper, the head of CENTCOM, was executing before we started the ceasefire and the negotiations over the Strait, Brad had concluded maybe 75 to 80% of the target package. There are targets that remain. and they're back to executing against that target package. I think the Iranian regime is in shambles right now. I think that's obvious. They're having a hard time holding folks together. But at each turn, what's happening is their leverage is degrading. Alternative routes are being created. I was just talking with our ambassador to Greece. We're doing a completely new route to get LNG into different regions in Europe. All of these supply chains are reoriented. All of this is oriented toward making the leverage of the Strait of Hormuz greatly reduced. In the meantime, again, the capacity is being reduced dramatically. This is not going to be a forever war. The question is, and then if you think about what it would have taken Brad to finish the target package, originally he was about 2 to 3 weeks away from completing the entirety of it. And so what you're seeing with these directed strikes, they're hitting military targets, but they're having a real impact.
Did President Trump and the Trump administration broadly miscalculate how the Iranians would take control of the Strait of Hormuz and how difficult it would be to wrestle back control?
I've been frankly quite amazed that people act as though there's some surprise that the Iranians would move on the strait. This has been, anybody that's studied this, I've been looking at it for decades. We've always known that's been the major choke point, is the Strait of Hormuz. That's the big warning, point, and that's been an issue for decades going on. So it's no surprise that it happened. I think one of the great surprises is that we kept oil from getting over $100 a barrel, that we've been able to mitigate considerably. A lot of cooperation, a lot of sharing, and a lot of work to make that happen.
America 250 is the big milestone this year, but we're also celebrating another. The anniversary of the stablecoin legislation is coming next week, I believe. It'll be 1 year since Trump signed that into law. That was your baby.
Yes.
So everyone in the industry I talk to says the real unfinished business is market structure, which sounds boring, but really is the ground rules for digital assets. So when should people expect to see the text of clarity?
Well, first, let me just give a little context on the Genius Act so the audience that may not be aware of it will understand it. The Genius Act basically enables and codifies the use of stablecoins. These are dollar-backed, U.S. Treasury-backed, dollar-for-dollar digital assets, digital coins, if you will. And it takes the United States dollar into the digital arena. Prior to the enactment of this law, the United States was basically out of the game. Europe was involved, China was involved, very, very aggressively moving on digital assets and digital currency. My sense was that if we did not step up and take a lead, the United States reserve currency status was in jeopardy. Now what we're seeing across the globe is different jurisdictions are making their regulations compliant with the Genius Act, which means that they'll be able to trade our digital dollars all over the globe. It's going to facilitate trade, good for the dollar, great for the demand for U.S. Treasury securities, by the way. Instead of having China and Japan be the largest owners of U.S. Treasuries, now it'll be stablecoin issuers. And by the way, we took a ton of risk out of the system because everybody knows this. When you deposit a check at a bank, it takes a few days to clear. An overseas transaction, 5 to 10 days. What could happen? Counterparty risk. The other side could go bankrupt. When we move onto the blockchain, it's instantaneous. Counterparty risk goes away. Think about currency risk. There's an entire industry in Wall Street and other places to try to deal with and adjust and hedge currency risk. That goes away when you instantaneously clear. And by the way, about $1.5 trillion worth of capital that's floating around in the system, now that it goes to an instantaneous clearing, is back into the economy where it could do some good. So this is a very positive step. The broader market is going to be affected by the digital assets rules on clarity. And that will address many other aspects of the ecosystem. We're very close. We know what the issues are. I think the problem that we're encountering is that we're nearing every day the midterm elections, and it's become increasingly difficult to get things done. I was extremely disappointed last night when the Democrats blocked even getting onto the National Defense Authorization Bill. That has never happened in history. One of our fundamental goals, we do this every year, is we fund the defense of our nation. That's even been blocked now. So it doesn't bode well for getting, again, bipartisan. I think we have bipartisan support for the Clarity Act, but the timing of it's getting more and more frustrating the closer we get to the election.
So when do you think we'll see text on clarity? This week?
The text is pretty much done, so it may be, it could easily be out this week.
Okay. What's the most substantive issue that you are most willing to compromise on to potentially get clarity across the floor.
We've already compromised a great deal, and the compromises are well intended. You've got a great desire by law enforcement, for example, to be able to trace any sort of illicit transactions. But at the same time, you don't want to make developers and software developers who touch it at any step of the way suddenly liable for something that they didn't do. If they don't take custody of any of the movement, if they just happen to facilitate the building of the chain somewhere along the way, they shouldn't find themselves inadvertently liable. It's things like this that require detailed negotiations and an understanding of the technology to make it work. But I think we've spent a lot of time getting to a good place on that. There's been a big debate over whether, for example, in the Genius Act, whether stable coins could issue any type of reward or interest.
Careful, Brian Moynihan's backstage, so let's be careful.
No, Brian knows the issue very well.
Yeah, I know the banks are very passionate about this.
There's been a lot of passion on all sides of this, but there's a compromise that's been worked out. The Council of Economic Advisors did an analysis of this, and frankly, if you think about where the hot money would have flown, that happened back when we went to money market funds, in my view.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying there wouldn't be some sort of impact, but the significance of it, particularly looking at the CEA study, is not going to be great.
You've spent decades in consulting venture capital, private equity. You've had one foot in the business world, one foot in Washington. What do the two worlds get wrong about one another? What do they misunderstand?
Thanks for bringing that up. And I started my career at the Boston Consulting Group. As we were talking backstage, I probably have served on more New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ boards than anybody else in the Senate. My entire career has actually been in business, and I only recently came into government. I've been in the Senate for a little over 5 years now. And I've watched the disconnect that you're talking about in real time. One aspect of it I think that Washington doesn't appreciate is that we need to have a much different perspective on business. That is that businesses in America, I mean, America's founded on free enterprise and liberty and allowing people to realize their dreams. The economy needs to facilitate that. And rather than having an overly restrictive view, and particularly in some situations, it almost feels as if the government views business as the enemy. We need to step back and say, are we going to be good caretakers of the ecosystem here and create an environment where investment can take place, investment begets jobs, jobs begets more economic activity, and prosperity follows. If you look at what we did with the Working Families Tax Cuts Act, some people call it the One Big Beautiful Bill, but this is the major piece of legislation that we passed just last year. The legislation started taking effect in January of this year. And what has it done? It's created the uncertainty that businesses need. This is the greatest set of incentives to invest capital in America that any of us have seen in our lifetimes. And now it's come into play. What's happening? Massive CapEx is coming into America. The trade deals that are being negotiated right now, $550 billion committed from Japan, $350 billion committed from Taiwan, I mean, $250 from Taiwan, $350 from South Korea. It goes on and on. Trillions of dollars are looking at this market as a new home. And as I see that investment come to play, we've got a great deal of opportunity here in America. We just need to step in and support it. I contrast that to the approach that the previous administration took. If you look at just the cost of the regulatory burden that they added, the incremental compliance cost of regulations invoked by the Biden administration, over $4 trillion. And we need to be facilitating business, not penalizing business. So I think that's the orientation. The certainty that the bill provided last year, I think, helps with that investment. Working families benefit, no tax on overtime, no tax on tips. These are things I think that are going to help raise the economy for everybody here.
There's something Vice President Vance said a few weeks ago that I can't stop thinking about. He said, the way that the Republican Party thinks about economic policy is more Alexander Hamilton than Milton Friedman, which essentially means Republican Party is more willing to use government to promote domestic industry rather than leaving outcomes entirely to markets. Is he right about that?
Well, I think what JD is doing is recognizing a reality that we live in a competitive environment, and we have adversaries that are non-market economies. I'm talking about China primarily. And how do you deal with the fact that they steal intellectual property, they subsidize their industry, they don't allow us to come into their markets under the same terms? It's a very challenging playing field right now.
So we have to become more like them to compete?
No, I'm not saying that, but I do think that if you look at specific industries, and I'm thinking critical minerals right now, specifically, we found ourselves in a situation where China's created choke points, and it's manifested itself. They did it to Japan back 2010, 2012. They tried to do it to us last year. President Trump has stopped it for a period, but there are certain areas where we cannot allow ourselves to be dependent on a country whose may not have our best interest at heart. And it goes beyond critical minerals. It could be pharmaceuticals. You think about it. So there are going to be strategic areas where we're going to have some involvement to protect ourselves.
Okay. You mentioned the Japan trade deal, $500 billion, I believe, they have in promised investment as part of the trade deal that President Trump negotiated. Is that, like, when will we see that come to fruition? Do we actually expect to see that amount of capital invested here?
So the total is actually $550 billion, Courtney, and already $40 billion has been committed in my home state. GE Verona is going to be a massive nuclear energy investment. You look at Ohio, a $36 billion commitment there, another energy-related investment with gas turbines. So it's coming, and the faster we can move. And I talk to the Japanese and the South Koreans all the time. I was ambassador in that region and know them well. They are looking for opportunities to make this work. They see the United States as the market that has the greatest set of opportunities right now. It's a growing market. You look around the world, Europe is not exactly the hottest place to be. The United States is. So everything is coming together from a capital investment standpoint. And now just go back to the chain of events. That CapEx will precipitate more jobs. Those jobs will precipitate more activity. That'll, therefore, more tax revenue for the country and more prosperity for Americans.
I want to end on one fun thing. You spent a lot of time in Japan. What's one Japanese idea or custom or tradition that you think Americans should steal?
It's interesting you say that because Japan spent so much time copying America.
Copying us.
And they've done a good job of it. You think about the best whiskey in the world, you got to go to Japan to get it now. But I would say their attention to detail and the perfection that they apply to everything, whether it's their food, you think about Deming going over there and the Japanese adopting their just-in-time type of practices. Very precise, very studious, very detail-oriented. But they also have been able to innovate over time. When I first moved to Japan in 1988, Boston Consulting Group sent me there for 3 years. Japan had just overtaken the rest of the world, overtaken the Soviet Union to become the #2 economy. Some people would be old enough to remember. They were talking about Japan maybe becoming #1. The innovation coming out of there was amazing. The first HD TV, you couldn't find it here. It was in Tokyo. Everything coming out of Sony Corporation. Anybody old enough to remember a Walkman?
Yeah.
I mean, it was really cool.
Yeah.
I think the innovation stuff has already come here. Look what's coming out of Silicon Valley right now. The innovation hub of the world right now is in America. But there are definitely things we can learn from Japan in terms of making that more precise. And I think there's a great partnership ahead.
Senator Hagerty, thank you so much for joining Axios.
Thanks.
Meet
Thanks.
you.
Great to have you.
Introducing Axios co-founder Mike Allen.
Good morning. Good morning, Axios House. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Mike Allen, co-founder of Axios. On behalf of my co-founders, Jim Vandehei, Roy Schwartz, we appreciate Bank of America for being a launch sponsor of Axios 10 years ago and creating and supporting this News Shaper series, fascinating, consequential conversations over the last decade. So thank you to Bank of America, and we thank them for the goodie box. Those of you watching on the live stream around the world, cover your ears because for our Axios fans in the room, the fan bands, which went viral in the World Cup Fan Fest cities, 3,000 people in line outside Rock Center the other day to get one of these fan bands that you have on your chair. So we thank Bank of America for being a great partner and for the fan bands. Brian Moynihan, Chairman and CEO of Bank of America, coming up on 17 years. He got the job the year after the financial crisis started and led Bank of America out of the financial crisis. Bank of America, not quite 250 years old, but its earliest legacy institution goes back 242 years now, 212 people, 35 countries around the world. Just last week, B of A was a returnee on Time's Best Companies list. It's on People's Companies That Care list. Brian, who is a very loyal Brown graduate, is Chancellor of the Brown Corporation. The pride of Marietta, Ohio, Brian Moynihan, welcome to Axios. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. You have your fan band here.
You can,
if you don't like them, your kids don't like you, you can trade them on eBay for some money. So
Yes, definitely take it to some.
you may need some revenue, Mike. So we'll work on that for you. But, no, it's been a great thing. I went to the one in Boston the other day at the game. It was a 4:00 game, and they had to cut the line at 2:45 to ensure that people could get into the game on time. So it's been fun to watch it play out, and people have enjoyed it. And so we'll get about $2 million amount, I think, at the end of the day. So it'll be good.
So, Brian, we'll start with our World Cup theme. And you scoff at a lot of the surveys that we obsess about because you have real-time data from 70 million customers and clients. And something fascinating B of A discovered in their internal data that I saw in your update the other day was that World Cup host cities are seeing a real increase in credit card spending, debit card spending, retail spending, brick and mortar, restaurant and bar spending. What are you finding about the World Cup effect on host cities?
So the theory, as our team said, it's a $40 billion impact, about half in America, half outside America in the cycle. This is the biggest, and having in America creates the most economic energy around it because just the size of the U.S. economy. And so that's been interesting. What we saw in the data, so the core consumer growth in spending for the second quarter is around 6%, picked up during the quarter, has been that in July. And what I mean by that is that's Bank of America customers, 70 million of them putting the money into the economy. What you saw in the host cities, though, is across all we put the clients into 3 buckets, low, medium, high-earning households. And then you think about virtual sales and bricks and mortar sales and bricks and mortar activity. And as you said, Mike, what you're seeing is that those cities are growing faster across all the different income cohorts, and the brick and mortar is growing faster, which means people are going out and watch parties and/or bars to watch things, which is good for that local economy because that's creation of economic activity. It's been fun to watch it all play out, and for us in the U.S. who don't, like myself, who didn't play soccer growing up, its viewership of, in the U.S. is multiples of things we're very familiar with. Tennis championships, golf. It's pretty amazing, even in the U.S., how much viewership is getting. Around the world, it's unbelievable. But
well, that is a zoom in part of a zoom out story. And Brian, over the years that I've been privileged to interview you, you always talk about the resilience of the American economy. But now there's a real story of the resilience of the American consumer. And some of the data points that you were sharing with Hans and me backstage surprised me. Because we know people don't feel good, but what are you seeing in your data?
So if you look at the broad-based consumer sentiment surveys, they say they're lows and et cetera, and you and your colleagues can tear them apart by political affiliation, all this stuff. But if you actually, I always say there's a say-do paradox, and the question is, what are people actually doing? And so in the first part of July here, the American consumer has moved 6% plus more money out of their accounts in the economy than they did the first part of July. And that's going to buy cruises and going out to eat and things like that. So yes, gas prices move it around a little bit, but you're happening. The second thing we're seeing, which is encouraging, is we're seeing income growth as paychecks come into our consumers. We can see the direct deposit. We're seeing income growth for the lower third of household income generators. You're seeing that grow as the fastest rate as a higher. That's picked back up. It grew about 4% plus last month. That's good news because it had grown faster, it lagged, now it's growing and it's caught back up. So all income cohorts are growing together. That's good news. But what they're spending on is indicative of them feeling pretty good about what's going on. Affordability is a real issue. And that's people saying, I worry about what I can do and housing costs and things, inflation, food inflation, gas prices. I'm not saying that's not a real issue, but what people are doing is still spending money, and that's good for the U.S. economy in the broadest context, because at the end of the day, about 2/3 of the activity is generated off of what a consumer does. And unless that breaks, you're going to have a solidly growing economy. We had this year 2% plus.
And are people spending in new places or new ways?
The numbers are so big, say $450 billion a month, so you see nuances, but it doesn't change dramatically. And so when gas prices go up which is only about 6% of credit card and debit card spending, which is only 25% of the total spending. So it's a small, when they go up, you see people spend lower, and you see some other things coming down. When people are feeling more or less confident, you'll see them spend a little less going out to eat, a little more on at stores buying food, and you see there's kinds of trade-offs. But the good news is with the unemployment rate at 4.2% and population growth very low, the prospects for high unemployment in the United States are very low, and that's a good thing because that means people are employed by companies like ours, and we're paying them well, and other companies, my colleagues are doing it, and that's good news for the American economy.
Axios has Erica Pandy. Fortunately, Bank of America has Erica, your virtual financial assistant, who has helped 21 million clients. What have you learned about how people use AI, what people are willing to tolerate? What can we learn about the trajectory of AI based on your Erica learnings?
So a couple things. One, which is instructive now, is to the quality of the AI models and stuff. 10 years ago or more, when we said we wanted to have a model that the customer could ask a question to, we wanted to have a way a customer asks a question to and get an answer. We tried to use the then existing search engines, and we got answers that made no sense. What's my balance? A picture of a scale. Things like that. So we said we had to build a model. So we went to Stanford, and they built what we call today a small language model. Nobody would call it that. But what was the key of that? The key was to sit there and say, as Erica opened up in 2018, there were 200 things you could ask it, and it could get right. And so I'll come back to that. Now there's 700 or 800. Last quarter, 200 million times it was used, and 20 million customers, you said. But what's the bridge between that? That's the lessons. The data has to be perfect, because people won't tolerate a wrong answer when they're asking about their financial affairs. There are other things you may tolerate a wrong answer. Who's older, X or Y, Mike or me, it may get it wrong, but life's not going to end because of that. But you won't tolerate a wrong answer about your financial affairs. So your data has to be perfect. The model rules then have to be perfect. They can't fantasize about what the answer is. And then you have to do it immediately with no latency. The person on the receiving end of that could be driving down the road here with a cell phone, with a connectivity that's in this neighborhood, which I don't know is good, bad, or indifferent, right? So people think this is so easy. All those things have to be in place. We spent $3 billion on our data to get it arrayed right for a whole set of reasons. That was a precursor to be able to entertain the idea you could use this stuff. Not to let you use it, just to entertain the idea. And so the growth of this will be unbelievable. We're seeing it. We have 100 and some use cases, 40-ish or so are active. We put another one in each week. It's across all the different aspects. We took the Erica model and put it into our tech break fix. So when you want to change your password or something, it's all done by that same technology. We put it into our cash management platform. Then we brought in, Agent Force. We brought in stuff for the investment bankers and things. So there's a lot of stuff out there, and we're pushing it ahead. But the lessons learned from the implementation of Erica is, for the business we're in, you own the answer whether the model does it or not. The data has to be perfect. The technology to manipulate the data and set of deterministic rules have to be perfect, and they have to get an answer. There are other ways you can use it, less deterministic, let it free form, but you have to have a human step in front and make sure the answer is right, because it'll once in a while go off on a tangent. And so we're trying to work that hard. And so we're using computer coding. 18,000 programmers are getting benefits out of it. We use it a lot of different ways in the company, but you had to start with this. Data has to be right, the rules have to be right, or to either train the model on or put in a deterministic type model, and then you have to have the output available with a pace that the customer expects. That's actually harder than people think.
Brian, on AI, as I've talked with you and listened to you over the years, you're neither a doomsdayer nor a utopian. If I'm a CEO, if I lead an organization, as many in our audience do, how should I think about how I train people, how I retain people? How do I think about the future when, for the first time ever in our business lifetimes, you really can't forecast it?
Right. Well, I think this is a people transformation of high order first, and then the technology second.
Wait, sorry, say that again. It's first a
people transformation.
People
have to
transformation.
adopt it and use it. Our customers have to use it. Our teammates have to use it. Our technologists have to learn how to use it. So you have to get. So what we did is we learning lessons all the way back in the .com era where we had e-catalysts and stuff like that. We said, let's create an AI catalyst team. Let's put very talented people in, but let's do something different. Let's go out and do listening sessions across the company. We did 5,000 teammates sat in groups of 10 and told people what they were doing, heard about it, thought about it and stuff, and said, okay, give us your ideas. And it's a bottoms-up process about how to incorporate it and use it with principles top-down on security and platforms and relative model management, not using high-powered models and all this stuff. But you really have to make it about the people. And then that's one thing. And I think it's incumbent upon business management to also manage the retraining and movement of people. So in 2025, we had 14,000 people move from job A to job B at Bank of America. That, that retraining and reskilling going on inside our company will intensify as we find productivity areas and then move people to other areas. And if we manage that well, then the human side of it can be handled better. And then, frankly, we even are participating with workforce development efforts, including the one recently called Raise US by Gina and the former governor in Indiana, Eric Holcomb, I think, to figure out how to take that kind of thought process and apply it in communities outside of companies that are big, because we can do it because we got lots of people, lots of time, lots of thought to think about it. So I think you need to think about it from the teammates that are doing the work to the center, not the other way around. And once you start thinking about that, then I think it'll be more effective, and I think it'll be more transformational. But I think the teammates will be harnessing it and empower themselves.
Brian, there were some grim forecasts about the effect on the early career workforce where my nieces and nephews are, or from early career white collar workers. What are you hearing from your biggest clients about what's actually happening?
People, we just hired 2,000, close to 2,000 summer teammates, and 2,000 full-time teammates will show up in next week. And so we've done that. We've increased our hiring from the military. We basically are hiring a lot of new talent. I think most of my colleagues are saying it really doesn't, there's certain areas where people are nervous how many people they need, like computer programmers. That's the big debate. You make them more efficient. We kept all 18,000 or just doing more work with them. In other words, we always had a shortage of capacity that was governed by our ability to get things done, et cetera. So if we can make those teammates, give them a set of products that they can become 10, 15% more efficient, we'll just do more stuff. So I think people are hiring people. I think unemployment's still low. I think there's a little dislocation around colleges, but we had 240,000 applications for the 2,000 teammates we brought in. They're highly talented, highly skilled. We need them. And then beyond that, we'll hire about another 3,000 kids over the next 12 months not from traditional college, from community colleges, from high school. And a person starting our company starts at $50,000 a year and gets full benefits. It's a good job. So you have to accumulate talent. My clients tell us that. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. The question is, how do you make it all work? And you said there's a little dislocation around what? Some of the job categories, people are worried about whether they're going to need as many computers. But 3 years ago, in the Great Resignation, you hit the bid on every technology coder you could. That's a little different now. And that's not because it's right or wrong. It's just the demand settled in. And so we'll see it play out. But so I think my advice to people in the university systems and the community college and stuff is make sure you develop a set of skills that employers need. And it's not necessarily all STEM skills. I was a history major. You have to be able to be curious and think and solve problems and make sure people are developing along those patterns.
That's a good question. What do you tell young people either to major in or career fields, or where do you see growth?
Unless they're going to be in a field which requires specific things, I think it's somewhat irrelevant. Just learn a lot and stay curious. I think whether they're computer science or whether they're biology or whether they're physics or whether they're math or whether they're history or whether it's social science or political science, as long as they take an interest and develop a deep thinking, I think that skill set is critically important to their development. So I just say stay curious, be curious, never quit learning, never quit reading, And don't be worried that the mathematical skills that are required to be in business, absent our highly skilled PhDs in mathematics who do a lot of our model development stuff like that, is not as high as people think. So just learn a lot about a lot of things and learn how it works.
Be curious how it works. I like that. So in addition to the 2,000 or 3,000 younger hires you just mentioned, just on Monday, Bank of America announced a bunch of senior hires, 200 bankers across 26 cities. And some of the markets, and I'm just curious about this list, there's a lot of overlap with Axios Local, but some of this is Bank of America's historic footprint, but what can you tell us about areas of the country that are growing, on fire, thriving? So the markets you mentioned in this announcement were Austin, Boston, Charlotte, Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, New York, San Francisco, West Palm. Like, what story does that tell us about who's thriving?
So we operate in 100 markets, and in the U.S. we operate in another 50 or 100 outside the U.S. But if you look across the U.S., which is a question, what you've seen is a little bit of less deterministic by the coast and the Silicon Valley or the Boston area or D.C. here for military and other types of work. Austin, those things are giving way now to much more broader location of activity, and that's part because, frankly, businesses learned something in COVID that we didn't think about, which was how easy you can manage people from afar, because everybody was at home. So, and I think that thought process has led people to think about location different in business, and then you take Nashville Center, Hagerty, you end up with a medical footprint developing there, or in Columbus, you have some of the great retailers off the university system there. So it really is different in every market. But if you look across all of them, what's been interesting is cities. I grew up in a little town in Ohio, which was an industrial town that, they had chemical plants and stuff like that from the Industrial Revolution. But if you think about Cleveland or Pittsburgh, you're seeing them come back in a different way than they were as industrial communities into research communities and technology development communities, which is good. They came down, Worcester, Massachusetts, they came down to size, and now they're working way out the other side for the last decade, which is good news to see that spread more across America.
So for Avery Lotz, our colleague who's writing about your remarks, so what's spreading out? Is it job growth, business creation? Like, what is it that we can say is spreading out across the country?
Sort of all the above, and I think even the willingness of the investor community. There's still ecosystems which are just hard to, the medical ecosystem around Boston, a few other places, the DC area with Johns Hopkins, stuff like that. The technology ecosystem, a little bit Boston, Silicon Valley, Texas. But what's spreading out more is I think the idea that people can, the build outs of these data centers and technology programmers and things like that, they like to live all over the place. And so you can find a good number of people in a lot of these towns, and that's what's happening. So if you would have said Plano, Texas would be a place that 40 years ago, between Plano and Dallas and stuff, we have 25,000 people or something like that. You wouldn't have said that's what would happen, but it was because there are lots of skilled employees, good place to work, good quality of life, and they grew. And so that's what companies are looking at. So you still have the dependency of that. What you're also seeing is the private equity and other money to push entrepreneurship and growth is moved out more than, they're finding companies all over the country, let's just say that.
Super interesting. Quick penultimate question in smart brevity. I know that you think that we over-index on our obsession with the Fed, but you've known the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, back to when he was working in the Bush administration. What can you tell us about how he thinks, how he'll lead, just what to watch?
I think he's been transparent with that. I think he's, he worked in the Bush administration, then became a Fed governor and worked in the aftermath of the financial crisis, and a lot of work on that, learned a lot from that. But I think he's been clear that the Fed's role is to look at, he's got these task forces, which I think lay out his strategy. He talked about yesterday in Congress and talked about it again today. But I think you should expect him to be, he's been clear. Inflation's they have two roles, inflation and employment. And they've got work to do on inflation, and they're going to continue to work on that because they can't have it be persistent because it can decay. But I think he'll be a traditionalist. I think he's thinking about the organization, how it runs, what it does. Circa 2000, he believes this, circa 2026, how should you modernize some of the activities of the Fed? It'll be an interesting question.
But you're one of the most famous CEOs in the world. What can we say about how he thinks, how he'll lead? Like his traits as a...
I think he's made it clear that he believes the Fed has a lane to stay in, and they should stay in that lane. I think overall, the U.S. economy is not a central bank-led economy. You see that more in smaller economies where they're more dependent on the activity of central bank to really set change where inflation goes 20% down and stuff like that. Our country, the best time of the economy is when nobody knows what the Fed does, because that means we're all focused on the real economy and driving it.
One fun thing, Brian, you're just back from the Badlands of the Dakotas, the opening of the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library, which Bank of America supported. What did you see there in the Badlands?
Well, I think it was interesting. I did a panel with Doris Kearns Goodwin, and she's studied the President Roosevelt immensely, and she said that this was fun, but there's an AI-driven thing that Microsoft helped them build that you can actually talk to them about questions, and they'll answer them based on whatever they can put, all the intelligences thing. And so she was looking forward to actually having a conversation with somebody she's actually had, in her mind, many conversations with, but this means she'll be, in her mind, a little less weird to be having them among herself, so she'll actually have it with something else. I think the museum is a spectacular place. Ed O'Rourke and team have done a great job. Governor Burgum, now Secretary Burgum, and putting it on the map. It's in a small town, but it's the entrance of Badlands. It's really a tribute to a person who was immensely interesting in that he was a progressive and brought in some of the regulations and trust busting, but on the other hand believed in capitalism done right is the right thing to do, and that but it really was a modernist, and he believed that capitalism plus you had to make sure you had the safety nets and the protections so society would benefit by capitalism. It's kind of an interesting thing when you think about his prescience 100 plus years later.
That's great. And to stick our landing here, what's a trait of TR that could help us?
I think it's the simple one. It's the arena speech type of thing, which is don't write about or watch, which I know I'm speaking to the wrong people to say this, but I always have said, blessed be the sports writers, for they've never played the game, right? And so the idea, he was like, you got to do stuff. You got to go in and help. You got to commit to public service. You got to commit to private service. You got to do things. Even though he was a prodigious writer, and as a leading author, he committed to doing things. And so I think that's the thing. So the idea of get on the field and get in the arena and fight, I think, is one trait. In the arena, I want to pause and thank the Axios Live team. They worked months and months and months for an event like Axios House. While we're all still in bed, they're here. So I thank them for their professionalism, their hard work, their creativity. Thank Bank of America for being a launch sponsor of Axios, for creating this News Shapers format, these great conversations, for being an amazing partner. And Brian Moynihan, thanks for doing and for a great conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Axios political reporter Hans Nichols.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Thanks you for the hello. My name is Hans Nichols. I'm a political reporter at Axios. I write a newsletter, which I'm sure you guys all read every night, but if not, you can sign up for it at axios.com/hillleaders. Thanks again for coming here. We're obviously celebrating 250 years, thinking through a lot of sort of difficult and challenging questions. That's why I'm really excited about our next guest, who sits on both the House Appropriations and Foreign Affairs Committee. She's really at the center a lot of these important debates. So please help me in welcoming Congresswoman Madeline Dean. Congresswoman. And this is narrow here. Thank you. I felt this was narrow here, so
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You made it. I almost had a blunder coming in. You were so passionate when we were chatting backstage about this vote that we're going to be having on the House will be having later today, the Massey Amendment on cutting aid to Israel. Walk me through how you're thinking about that vote, how you think about the amendment. Is it flawed? And ultimately, which way do you think you will vote later today?
Well, first, thank you for inviting me and including me today. And I like that you set the stage on the 250th. I had the chance to be with about 40 members of Congress in Independence Hall, and it was about 104 degrees. But I have to tell you, I had a chill up my spine being there in Independence Hall, my city of Philadelphia, celebrating the 250th. And so I don't want the 250th to be a single day. Let it guide us through this election cycle. Remember the courage and wisdom of our founders, and we have a job to do. To get to your question, later today we have likely a vote on the Massey Amendment, which is a flawed amendment with, sadly, I think, a flawed messenger. But it's about an issue I care deeply about. And I'm somebody, Hans, I hope you don't mind, but I don't preview my votes, but I can tell you how I'm thinking of it. Okay. I still have more conversations to have. The amendment would cut funding for Israel, important funding for Israel. And some of it is peacekeeping funding. The major part of it is military funding. I'm somebody who has been to Israel 5 or 6 times, at least 3 since October the 7th, and I care desperately about Israel's security, safety, dignity, right to exist. But I also care deeply about the Palestinian right to exist, the Palestinian right to dignity, sovereignty. And I have seen up close, sadly, and spoken with Mr. Netanyahu about the atrocities that Israel has carried out in the face of the atrocities that they suffered. And so I am somebody who does not want to send another dime to the Netanyahu coalition. I don't know that this is the right vehicle for it, but I'm considering very strongly my vote on this. And I want people to know this is an attempt at a wedge issue. This is an attempt to try to get between the Democrats to say, see, they don't have a unified set of values around the Israel-Palestinian West Bank situations, and right to dignity, and right to sovereignty, and right to peacefully exist. I've been to the West Bank. I have seen what the settler movement has done, what the terror of the settler movement is. This is not a wedge issue for the Democratic caucus. So if people vote yes on the amendment, if they vote no on the amendment, some may vote present on the amendment, I will not be critical. But where I am leaning is not another dime to Mr. Netanyahu as he prosecutes both the war improperly, grotesquely targeting healthcare workers, hospitals, even as he told me face to face, he could micro-target because of their superior military and intelligence. They could micro-target, and we've seen Israel do it, but we have seen the calamitous result of what has happened there.
Do you trust Netanyahu?
I do not.
Okay. Why not?
Because I think he has lied to our faces. As I said, on the micro-targeting, on the targeting, even in a place as dense and difficult as Gaza is. I've spoken with healthcare workers, physicians, Dr. Maynard, for example, a talented cancer physician who has operated in Gaza before and after October the 7th. And I told him this conversation I had with Mr. Netanyahu. And he said, I've seen them do that. I've seen them take out a single apartment to get a Hamas leader. And then he said, I saw them just collapse whole buildings, whole suburbs, whole apartments, taking out civilians, taking out hospitals. And so I don't trust him. I think it's a shame that it is Mr. Netanyahu who convinced the president to go to this reckless war of choice in Iran.
What's the level of anger and how widespread are your views within the Democratic caucus?
I don't want to give a temperature gauge there. I have to tell you, we have had really healthy conversations, caucus conversations around this amendment. It has provoked really good conversations. And what I have seen is just real respect. You can imagine this is a tremendous set of issues. Whether you are a Jewish American or not. I represent suburban Philadelphia, a tremendous number of Jewish American folks there. And I have seen such a coming together, to be honest, as a result of this really flawed amendment, but around the issue of money to Israel for defense or offense. The other thing we can say is Mr. Netanyahu himself has said it's time to get rid of the MOU. We're up for renegotiation on the MOU. He himself has said Israel's well enough off, they really don't need our money. I agree with him.
So this could be a precursor, this vote could be a precursor for much more substantial rewriting of the United States-Israel relationship.
Well, that discussion will be going on, absolutely. And you've seen a real change, an absolute change. The other piece of it is, let's be clear, I've been watching very closely from day one the aid, whether it is food or medicines or, is that gentleman okay?
Okay. I think
He fainted?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Excuse me.
Yes. Sorry,
Okay.
we had someone who wasn't well for those following on at home, and the Congresswoman graciously inquired
Sorry.
about his health.
It's hot.
Yeah.
Sitting in that window, it would be very, very hot. I have visited Israel recently, 6 months or so ago, with members of Congress, and we went to it's a place like this, a very large warehouse that is the center of both military and nonprofit organizations sending aid into Gaza for nutrition, for health, and for reconstruction, for rebuilding, clearing and rebuilding. That has been gravely reduced in the recent months. And so I'm watching that very closely. The Netanyahu government said there was no famine when there was famine, said there was no widespread illness when there was widespread illness, said that civilians were not being targeted in food lines, for example. So to your question, no, I don't trust them.
If Democrats take back the majority, will this be one of your first investigations? And just broadly give us a sense of what you're thinking about investigating and targeting should you take the majority.
We're going to take the majority, Hans.
Okay.
I'm going to knock on whatever I can, because I think the American people are completely dissatisfied with this feckless Republican majority, failing to lead. And I think we have a responsibility when we do take the majority in the House, and I would love it if we could also get the majority in the Senate. Accountability is going to be important. But number one, and we can do two things at once, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and we will lead. We can tackle the issues that Americans care about. In my suburban district, they care about the cost of their housing. They care about the cost of gas. They care about inflation. They care about the cost of utilities.
I'm glad you mentioned gas, because we have these Freedom Fuel gas stations in I guess they're in Pennsylvania, elsewhere.
One in my district, at least one in my district.
And they're offering discounted gas.
Yes.
So what do we know about them? What don't we know about them? And do you think there's something sort of fishy going on there?
It's bizarre. One is right in Drescher in my district, if any of you know suburban Philadelphia, and you see that they're selling gas at $3.47. What a clever number to represent the 47th president, I suppose, as a nod to him.
Okay.
It must be gold emblazoned. I haven't visited it yet, but I'm certain it must be gold emblazoned. I have more questions than answers. We don't really know who is behind it. It would have to be subsidized, I believe. I don't know who's buying gas and the ability to sell at retail with those prices. There's some connection, we believe, to some real estate folks.
Okay.
There's a common theme there, isn't there? Real estate folks and oil in the Middle East. But we really don't have answers to it. It doesn't seem like it makes any sense, and they're both in Pennsylvania and New Jersey.
You gave a great deal of confidence on the House flipping. Walk me through your evening on election night. Why are you so? What races are you looking at Pennsylvania? There are 4 to 5 seats that are potentially that you guys can flip. And why Why are you so confident? Help us understand sort of the general confidence you have.
The extraordinary dissatisfaction that my constituents and constituents in seats around me, and I can detail those for you, have shown in what's going on. A president who is not focused on their needs, who promised lower prices and bringing more peace. And of course, he's done the exact opposite through his reckless and illegal tariffs, through his insane, inhumane, and un-American immigration policies. In 1 week, 2 more people on the street, husbands, fathers, shot dead in broad daylight, in cold blood, by ICE officers who are unmasked. A reckless, a reckless war with Iran. People in Pennsylvania, and I will tell you, Republicans too, people who have voted for this president, who wanted this president to be successful. I wanted him to be successful. I didn't vote for him, but I wanted him to be successful. They are extremely dissatisfied. You've seen the polling numbers. His numbers are terrible. But rather than walk you through election night, I want to walk you through what I'm doing now. Okay. I'm working, of course, for my own reelection. You know the entire House is up. And so in my suburban Philadelphia seat, Montgomery and Berks counties is what I represent. I have the privilege of representing the place where I grew up, my hometown, my husband's hometown, where we raised our kids. I'm running for reelection and hope to win very well. But I'll be working for unseating Mr. Perry, for example, unseating Mr. Muser, for example, unseating Mr. Fitzpatrick. And I don't say this out of a lack of friendship for any of these folks. Unseating Brejnahan and McKenzie. 5 opportunities in Pennsylvania to do it the old-fashioned way, not through redistricting, but to do it with talented people who are responding to a call to service to say, these folks have been complicit with a president who does not share our values and is not taking the country in the right direction. I believe we're going to be able to do it.
Well, I have so many more questions. We are out of time. This has been flashing at us for some time. I wanted to ask you about torpedo bats because my son had a question for you about torpedo bats, but we'll do that for another time. But I'd like to thank you very much for coming, Congressman. To all of us in our audience, thank you very much for being here. Thanks to Bank of America for making all this possible. And please feel free to stick around and linger and enjoy the nice spread we have for you. So thank you very much.